In my past life, my sister, Ivy Bright, urged me to skip class, play online games all night, and sleep through lessons. Whenever I tried to study, she mocked me for pretending to be so serious. But at night, she was burning the midnight oil, studying in secret during holidays and meeting with star scholars like Mia Goldstein at the library. When the SATs came around, she got into Ivy Tech University, graduated to work at Stellar Innovations Inc., and married a programmer making hundreds of thousands a year. I, on the other hand, scored just 200 points, earning the disdain of my parents, who sent me to Midland Assembly Plant to screw bolts. Later, I married a guy like Trey Walters, who abused me even while I was pregnant, leading to my tragic death during childbirth. At my funeral, Ivy wore her mask of sorrow and said, "Hazel was so smart but refused to apply herself. Everything she faced was her own doing. Unlike me, who always worked hard and changed my fate through education." Then, I opened my eyes. I was back at the Cyberzone Lounge, locked in an intense gaming session with my team. I shook my drowsy head, grabbed my grimy backpack, and sprinted home. At home, Ivy was furiously scribbling notes under her desk lamp. Seeing me, she quickly stashed her study sheets. "Hazel, why are you back? Now your team is one short. How will they win without you?" It was always Ivy who dragged me to the lounge. Then, she'd yawn, fake being tired, and sneak off to study at home. I grabbed my untouched SAT prep books and taped my target school, Harvard MIT Alliance, on the wall. Ivy's face darkened with rage. "You? Harvard MIT? Who do you think you are?" Not only would I aim for Harvard MIT, but I'd show her that natural talent could never be surpassed by hard work. The smoky, sweat-filled air of the Cyberzone Lounge lingered in my memory as my teammates shouted obscenities after a loss. It hit me. I'd been reborn. I was back at 17, just 1 month before the first major SAT mock exam. I didn't care about the commotion I left behind. Grabbing my filthy bag, I bolted. "Hazel, you promised to carry us to gold rank," they yelled after me, but I didn't turn back. My future mattered more than their fleeting victories. When I got home, it was 1 a.m. Ivy's light was still on, her silhouette reflected in the window. Her pen raced across the paper. I barged into her room. Ivy jumped, hastily shoving her study guide under her arm. Smirking, I recorded her with my phone. "You said you were too tired to study, so why are you still up?" I yawned. Feigning nonchalance, she replied, "Oh, I woke up to use the bathroom and realized my backpack wasn't packed. I'm just fixing it before going to bed." Ivy turned off her lamp. I returned to my room, flicked on a desk light I hadn't used in ages, and opened my blank prep books. In my past life, I barely scraped into high school by cramming during my final weeks of middle school. Ivy, meanwhile, convinced me that being friends with the cool kids mattered more than grades. The school's pay-to-play honors track was filled with rich kids who slacked off but bought their way in. I believed Ivy and started skipping classes to hang out with them at Cyberzone Lounge. We measured status by gaming prowess, and I became the best of them. But I hadn't realized they were all wealthy. By senior year, they transferred to private international programs or left for prestigious overseas schools, ready to inherit family businesses. My parents, though, were just regular workers. Without good grades, I had no future except assembly lines. At Midland Assembly Plant, Trey Walters, a worker with bleached blonde hair, took an interest in me. I mentioned it to Ivy, who cheered me on. "True love is priceless," she said. "If Trey loves you, that's all that matters. Love conquers all." I believed her. Trey and I moved in together, had a baby without a wedding, and barely signed the marriage certificate. Once married, Trey started beating me. Drunk, he'd mock me. "You and Ivy came from the same parents. Why is she so brilliant while you're as dumb as a pig?" I cried bitterly, wondering where I had gone wrong. I used to be the smartest one, the girl who could solve problems at a glance, memorize pages instantly. My middle school teachers couldn't believe I had failed my SATs. My tragic fate culminated in a difficult labor. Trey refused a C-section, resulting in both my baby and me dying. On my deathbed, I called Ivy endlessly, but she claimed she was too busy. The moment I passed, she showed up. At my funeral, people shook their heads, saying, "How did such a bright girl end up like this?" Ivy put on a show of grief. Hazel was so smart but wasted her potential. Her downfall was her own fault. Unlike me, I worked hard and changed my fate through perseverance. Once everyone left, Ivy gloated over her victory. Turns out, Ivy had always been jealous of me. As a child, I was the center of our parents' attention. Her envy consumed her. She manipulated my trust and orchestrated my downfall. This time, I wouldn't fall for her tricks. I wrote "I will get into Harvard MIT" in bold letters and taped it above my desk. I caught 2 hours of sleep before heading to school at dawn. By the time my classmates arrived, I'd already memorized both volumes of freshman English vocabulary. Hazel Bright's actually studying? That's a first. Only 6 months until the SATs. Even if she tries, the best she can hope for is community college. With her grades, a state school's out of reach. She'll end up in some overpriced private college at best. I ignored the chatter. My scores would do the talking. Ivy showed up late as usual, barely beating the bell. "Hazel, why didn't you wake me up this morning?" she complained. "I'll be at school by 5 a.m. From now on, set your own alarm if you want to join me." me. Ivy looked puzzled. Why would you get here so early? You don't even study. From behind me, Ethan Carrington chimed in. Your sister's been up since dawn memorizing vocab. She's already gone through 2 books. Something seriously up with her. Ivy froze, then exploded. Hazel, we're just here to get a degree. After we graduate, we'll both head to Midland Assembly Plant. I've heard top workers make good money there, over $3,000 a month. I pulled out my phone and played the video I'd recorded. If the assembly plant's so great, why are you sneaking in late-night study sessions? Ivy's face went pale. Ethan grabbed my phone and barked, Ivy Bright. No wonder you always ditch our games midway. You've been secretly studying all this time. All that effort, and you still only scored 400 points? Guess your brain's not built for this. Ivy flushed with rage. She opened her notebook and tried memorizing vocab, but after 10 repetitions, she still couldn't get it. After school, I still went with the rich kids to the Cyberzone lounge. I wasn't about to cut ties with them. Someday, they'd be valuable connections. In my past life, Ivy snatched up all the relationships I'd worked so hard to cultivate. This time, that wasn't happening. After leading my team to 5 straight wins, I rushed home. When I walked in, my parents immediately went on the offensive. Well, look who decided to come home early. Didn't you say you'd rather die at Cyberzone Lounge than come back here? Why don't you just stay there forever? Let's see what kind of SAT scores you'll pull off. In my last life, my parents had tried everything to get me to study, but I blindly believed Ivy's lies and rebelled. Eventually, they gave up on me, only making sure I wasn't starving but otherwise washing their hands of me. After my death, though, they mourned for a long time. My mom was hospitalized from the grief. I dropped to my knees with a thud. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I was so stupid before. I'll study hard and get into a good college, I swear. My mom turned to look at me, stunned. Then she quickly wiped her tears, pretending she wasn't crying. My dad helped me up immediately. It's all right. You finally understand. I always knew you weren't a bad kid at heart. There's not much time left, but give it your all. If it doesn't work out, we'll figure something out, even if it means another year of preparation. I nodded firmly. Don't worry. I'll get in on the first try. I'm aiming for Harvard-MIT Alliance. Ivy stepped out of her room holding her notebook. Hazel, why are you back? Weren't you gaming with Ethan and the others at Cyberzone? She walked up to me, fake innocence dripping from her expression, before dramatically pinching her nose. You, Hazel, you reek of cigarettes. The smell is unbearable. My mom leaned in, sniffed, and instantly slapped me across the face. I knew it. You can't change your ways. Can you? Lying about studying, coming home stinking of smoke. With grades like yours, scoring 200 on the SAT, and skipping class to play games, if you can get into Harvard MIT, then pigs might fly. Disappointed, my dad sighed and followed my mom back to their room. Alone with me, Ivy dropped her mask. Hazel, stop wasting your time. 6 months isn't enough for you to surpass me. I've been holding back. I'm not just a 400-point scorer. I laughed coldly and walked to my room. Words wouldn't convince anyone. I'd let my results speak for themselves. Weekly tests rolled around, and while I showed improvement, my scores were still far from passing. Ivy, on the other hand, dropped her facade and performed at her real level, 2nd in the class and 10th in the grade. The homeroom teacher praised me, saying I had a shot at getting into a state college. I glanced at Ivy's test papers. She hadn't solved the hardest questions. Her brain just wasn't built for it. Ivy shoved her paper in front of me, pointing at her scores. Hazel, look. I got a perfect score in English and 129 in math. What about you? She pretended to examine my scores. Wow, a 59 in math? South close. If the test was out of 100, you'd be just 1 point away from passing. Too bad it's out of 150, and passing is 90. Oh, and you're so much better in reading and writing, 60 in English. Your verbal scores definitely beat your math. Ethan tried to console me. Hazel, maybe studying isn't your thing. You've stopped pulling all-nighters with us at Cyberzone. Without you, we're losing ranks like crazy. Ivy jumped in with fake scolding. Ethan, don't say that about my sister. She's aiming for Harvard MIT. The whole class erupted in laughter. Seriously? Hazel Bright, the future Harvard MIT scholar? With a total score under 400, she thinks she can get into Harvard MIT? That's hilarious. She must think she owns Harvard MIT and can just waltz in whenever she wants. Ignoring them, I pulled out a SAT prep workbook and got back to solving problems. Suddenly, my homeroom teacher, Gregory Nash, barged into the classroom, waving a stack of scratch paper. Hazel, is this yours?